Hello and welcome to the Food Fight podcast from EIT Food, a show exploring the biggest challenges in our food system and the innovators dedicated to solving them. I'm your host, Matt Eastland, and this week we're diving into one of EIT Food's core missions, net zero food systems. It's a critical topic. The global food system is responsible for roughly 1/3 of all human-generated greenhouse gas emissions. So reaching net zero will require nothing short of a systemic transformation. That means accelerating the shift towards sustainable and regenerative agriculture practices, unlocking new markets that reduce food loss and waste, and empowering all actors across the value chain to participate in a truly circular food economy. These themes took centre stage at NextBite 2025 in Brussels earlier this year, where we heard a wide range of perspectives on how to turn this ambition into reality. With an industry that contributes so heavily to global emissions, there's no shortage of pathways to drive meaningful change. One of the most significant and most scrutinised is animal agriculture. The environmental cost of raising animals for food is well documented, and the numbers remain stark. Livestock production accounts for around 14% of global greenhouse gas emissions, according to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization. An estimated 60% of all mammals on Earth are livestock, while just 4% are wild. And at any given time, there are roughly 26 billion chickens, outnumbering humans more than 3-1. With figures like these, it's clear why many leaders in the field, including Adi Yehezkeli, CEO of Fabumin, see reducing our reliance on conventional animal agriculture as a crucial step in cutting emissions.
The need to eat less meat or to decrease the meat consumption is the most crucial thing. And this is why it's not the reason, because I became vegan and vegetarian like 30 years ago, vegan 10 years ago. I had compassion and I was feeling sorry about the animals. And only in the last few years, I understand the climate issues that they're causing or the damage that this industry causing. So I would say that we need to decrease, of course, the meat use or eating meat. But also we can offer alternatives, just like we do in Fabumin, because if we will offer replacement for eggs, we will reduce the carbon emission as well, because the carbon emission also in the egg industry is huge enough, because we need also to feed those chickens, the chicks and the hens, and there is a transport of those animals. There is a lot of climate damage involved in this industry, regardless our compassion for animals. So I would say, yes, we do need to eat less meat. Try to avoid it at all. I know it's difficult, but we will do the transmission. And of course, to find more alternatives.
But not everyone thinks that ditching meat and dairy completely is the answer. Arnaud Delacour, founder and CEO of the Very Food Co., believes a slightly less hard-lined approach is the way forward.
I think you have to look at it from a different perspectives. First, I think there's been a big push from the industry, me including, in kind of convincing people to change their diet. I think it's what we've seen this past 10 years ago with all the funding that came on the market for plant-based meat. And I think what we see now is that convincing people to change their diet has some limitations. And so what we're really focusing now, and I think a lot of other startup companies or even bigger companies are looking at that, is how we can replace ingredients, things that are invisible to the consumer. They bring a lot in terms of functionality. They have a big impact on our food system. And yet, if you replace egg white with aquafaba, you may not even need to say it, like it may not be a marketing thing. So I think we're moving away from having to convince people to, go vegan or reduce their meat consumption and just do something that makes sense both economically and functionally. And plant proteins is just superb. We have a lot to do because animal agriculture has been here for a long time, and we've really optimized all the processes around animal agriculture. So we'll still have a lot to discover around plant proteins, and I'm very optimistic that it will be a big part of the challenge is to replace the invisible.
Of course, aquafaba isn't the only ingredient providing exciting alternatives to meat products.
There's like 10,000 different seaweed species that we're currently not utilizing in the food industry. 70% of the planet is covered by oceans compared to land, but we are still using 98% of the caloric intake every day from land-based products. This is not just a missed opportunity. This is also plainly just stupid. I mean, we're destroying and using so many resources on land while we could have that much more efficiently and with zero input from the ocean.
That was Denise Fitchachoglu, co-founder and CEO of Wonderfish, a company committed to bringing more seaweed-based products into Europe's food sector. While seaweed has long been a dietary staple in East Asia, consumption in Western markets is rapidly gaining momentum, and for good reason. Seaweed is nutrient-dense, fast-growing, and requires no freshwater, fertilizer, or arable land to produce. As the global population grows and pressure on agricultural resources intensifies, seaweed stands out as one of the most scalable and sustainable sources of future food. In fact, estimates suggest it could supply more than 100 million tons of additional food by 2040, offering a powerful lever for improving nutrition, diversifying diets, and reducing the environmental footprint of the food that we eat. Carbon emissions reduction extends far beyond the development of alternative ingredients. In reality, every corner of the food system holds significant potential to lower its environmental impact. As Krzysztof Klinczewicz from the University of Warsaw observed, transforming the system requires a holistic view, one that recognises how even incremental improvements across multiple stages can collectively drive substantial reductions in our planetary footprint.
I would look at the sector of food processing, which seems to generate a lot of waste in many countries, in many companies, because it's like, low-hanging fruit, something that you could achieve relatively easily. Digitalization of production processes, optimization of warehousing, switching to production that resembles more sort of just-in-time production than just, storage and a lot of food losses would definitely be useful. The same with also all sorts of food service, catering, restaurant sector. Here, food losses are a major issue, and everybody knows how to solve this problem. It seems simple, and yet nobody wants to tackle this directly. So that's short-term solution. But at the same time, I think we really need to also think more systematically and transform the entire value chain. So it has to start with agricultural produce, use, for example, of pesticides. It's very positive that, for example, within European Union, European Commission is even thinking about this topic in the context of national or regional independence, so that the bloc of countries would not heavily depend on imports of certain products, ingredients, components from abroad. So it came up to the level of political discussions, right? So it's not only climate, it's not only short-term solution, it might be part of a huge strategic thinking process.
The global farming population is ageing rapidly, and the UK is no exception. With the average farmer now around 59 years old, the need to attract and empower the next generation has become increasingly urgent. Without fresh talent, new skills, and renewed interest in agricultural careers, the sector risks losing its capacity to innovate, adapt, and meet the evolving demands of a sustainable food system.
So my name is Esteve. I am the co-founder of a startup called Agroboros, and I'm also a student in agroecology in the Netherlands. So in this startup, we started all these things because we saw that new generations were more and more disconnected with like the realities of farming and food systems and understanding all these concepts. And we see that we have a growing disconnect also in terms of young farmers taking over the land. So we wanted to tackle this issue. We wanted to address this issue. And that's why we created Agroboros, which is about creating educational programs to make these topics of food systems, realities of farming, and all this interconnection more accessible to children. So mostly focused on primary school children in urban areas, because we think that's where most of the work has to happen. And so to make this more accessible, then we're really trying to recreate some sense of magic and fascination for the child. Not only pure based science about, okay, that's not only a carrot that is growing in this farm, but it's also all these cycles that are interconnected with it. And not only on the ecological side, but also on the social, on the political, economical side. So these topics are tough for children, but at the same time, if we want a shift of mindset that is like really durable over the long time, we need to try to make them really into that. So how we do it is through a lot of storytelling, through a lot of like art-based learnings, a lot of like sensory learnings. So they become real characters of like solving situations that are on the farms. We're working on the farms with the farmers mostly. And we're trying to bring topics of climate change in our program. So that's why we also want to approach these questions with children. To me, I think there is a lot of work and a lot of improvement to make in the animal farming area for several reasons. I think there's a lot about, we talk a lot about like methane emissions that goes by like ruminants, like cows, sheep, goats. And these methane emissions are like staying in the atmosphere less longer than CO2, for example, but are way more aggressive than CO2. So there is methane emissions through regular gas emissions by the animals, but also through manure management that is not well managed a lot of times in a lot of places. And I think a very big point also about these greenhouse gas emissions in animal farming is about feed crops production. I think there's a big shift that needs to happen also on this, because a lot of our land is meant for feed crops monoculture, such as like soybeans, these kind of things, but also deforestation for growing this feed and for pasture, for example. So if we were shifting towards using this land for food crops or rewilding, reforesting, I think we would store more carbon, for example, and we'll just reduce emissions overall. So I think it's very connected to what we're doing, because I think like the most important is like the shift in mindset about, okay, maybe you can consider to consume less animal products or become vegetarian fully, or vegan even. So we're trying to bring these things to children.
Bringing the next generation into the food industry and equipping them to understand the climate challenges it faces is undeniably valuable. But what concrete steps must farmers and other industry stakeholders take to transition to low-emission practices? And perhaps even more importantly, what obstacles stand in their way?
Generally, I think what we need to adopt more is a diversity in what we cultivate and then also use in the food industry. But that's very much easier said than done, because what I mentioned earlier is that we've built this food system in such an efficient way that every time we have a banana that's swaying off, 2-3 centimeters, or the color is off, it just doesn't fit in the system anymore and it doesn't get used. It's just waste. And so introducing more diverse crops and products is really, really hard, because then suddenly the product prices explode quite massively. But if we don't, on the farming side, if we don't really start doing this and offer alternatives, then nobody's going to pick them up either. What I love about the seaweed farming part is that it doesn't necessarily take away jobs, but it just gives an alternative in terms of income to fishing communities. So we say you don't necessarily need to give up all the fishing, but why don't you add seaweed farming to it to have a more symbiosis in the maritime ecosystem and also generate a more resilient income. And that's probably something we need to see on land as well, like mixing maybe animal farming with diverse crop farming and bringing back the diversity.
Okay, by name Wasonga Enoch Omanga. I'm a Kenyan student studying farm management at University of Weinstefan-Christoph in Germany. And I'm also a co-founder of Nutrica Limited, Enterprises Limited, which is a group that is focused in producing pre-cooked, dehydrated beans. This means that we cook the beans and dry it for our consumers, depending on their taste and preferences. And I'm also having a background in agricultural economics and farm management. And I'm very much interested in things to do with regenerative agriculture and food value chain productions. So I believe, yes, this kind of systems are key to net zero emissions. And the reason why I say this is relevant to us in what we do, we are planning to have a system where we have contract farming with the farmers who produce our beans that we later cook and dehydrate. So with the contract farming, we are going to help the farmers we're going to help the farmers come up with very efficient and effective agroeconomic processes that help them to produce organically and all that kind of stuff. So some of the changes that we will advise them to do include going straight to organic farming, some agroeconomic process like mulching of the products, crop diversifications, and such kind of challenges. And most importantly, that what we are focusing on is organic productions, which means we are going to ask them to use organic fertilizers and also reduce the chemicals that they apply in these farms as they produce these beans. So the biggest challenges that they're facing are two. The challenges are the funding gaps. You find that it is very expensive to adopt this kind of production systems. And also number two, which is a big challenge, is the knowledge gaps. You find that most farmers don't have the knowledge that they require to produce in these ways that the customers prefer, particularly in the European Union, where consumers are really, really into what they consume and they really want to understand how it is produced.
With so many challenges facing farmers and producers, the wider question remains, who truly holds the responsibility for driving these positive changes? Is it the industry itself, policymakers, consumers, or a combination of all three? And how can accountability be shared to ensure meaningful progress?
I think it's a bit difficult to impose on people, on consumers. And I think we see that from lobbies or, when we talk about climate crisis, the oil industry came with the footprint analogy and say, yeah, you have a footprint. And it's kind of diverging the responsibility from big corporates. We have a role to play as consumers as well, but it depends a bit what's the choice out there. So I think it comes from companies. I think big corporates, they have a big role to play. And I think policymakers as well. We can't expect people to change just because it's good for the planet, both the consumers and especially big corporates. So we need to make it attractive or unavoidable, maybe, in order for these big corporates to go. It's been I think we had this issue, like if you compare on another topic, additives in the US and additives in Europe. In Europe we have something a lot stricter, but somehow it works. At the end, there is less additives in our food than there is in the US. Maybe we should also have this type of rules for having what is our target in terms of emissions from our food system and how we can reduce. And if we have the right rules, I'm sure they'll be followed because we won't have any choice.
I guess it's the whole stakeholders. It's the end consumer, the producers, also the farmers. They have to be involved in this kind of it's not a revolution. I know revolution scares people. Let's call it transmission or something more that people can adjust. Like the word vegan. people don't like the word vegan. We're trying to place it with plant-based. So all the stakeholders need to be around the table, even the farmers who raise the animals, because we don't want to take their work, their income. So let's think together. And so I say that I think the responsibility is upon all of us, all the value chain, from the producer, from the plants, from everybody that on the value chain until the end consumer. And the pressure needs to come with the end consumer. They have a massive power on the producer, so we can do that.
It's important not to lose sight of what we're aiming for. So to close out this episode, we asked experts and innovators to share their visions of what a net zero food system could look like by 2050.
That's a big question, because how fast we can get there, and what visible change we can see. As I said, a big part of our footprint, of our footprint, is coming from agriculture and animal agriculture. We have to expect, for example, the Western diet to be closer to what the Asian diets is today, with more plant protein, with more tofu, with more things like that are good for the health, good for the planet. And when it comes to ingredients, we have to expect also diminishing the animal ingredients in our food system. And so I think there are things that will definitely be visible, what is on our plates. And I think it also comes down also to economical factor, because we are on this only planet that we have, and we can't really grow more animals. And there will be a time, and I think we're starting to do that, where meat consumption, fish consumption starts to decline, not only because people don't want to eat that, but because they can't afford it. And the idea is to accompany this change, this shift, so people have enough to eat and they can still obviously enjoy with a new diet. So one again that is closer to the Asian diet. So I think there are things that will be visible, and some of the things that again they will be invisible to the consumer, and like the ingredients. I think it will be a combination of both for sure.
That's not that far in the future, to be honest. But I have to say I'm optimistic in the sense of that we will see change, because a lot of things that we do today, how we act today, are really from our perspective and from our generational perspective. If I look at my nieces who are 4 and 8, they already have a different approach to food, and they question food, quite differently than when I was a kid. So this will be the generation that will drive the change. And maybe 2050 is not where we see the tipping point, but we will definitely see the plant-based and hybrid space finally skyrocketing. We're still in the very early growth phase for plant-based. I know everyone's disappointed about the growth in the past 2 years, but this is really just a plateau of the very bottom of the growth curve. So I truly believe in 25 years, this will be completely different.
I always picture in my mind factories with smoke, and I know it's not that simple, but somehow it's related to me as clean air, which I know it's invisible, but still, I think I imagine clean air and nature. I know it sounds quite bizarre, but this is what I'm picturing, like something clean and green and healthier for the environment and for us, because it's healthier for our health, but it's healthier to our soul as well. So it's really interesting to imagine zero carbon emission, but it's also related to effectiveness, because as we use our resources once again, it's very effective. It's more effective than just one use. But I can't imagine that. I can't imagine how effectiveness looks like. And I have another issue that I wanted to address. It's also the hybrid, because I think the future for us, I talked about the transmission, and I think the transmission related to the hybrid product that we can offer to the market, us startups that present alternatives. And I think the hybrid product is the right way to go to help people to do this transmission from eating, because people are eating meat for thousands of years. And now we're telling them one in 2 or 3 decades to stop. It's not going to happen. We need to accompany them during the transmission, and we can make some hybrid product. So we won't replace the whole egg components in our product, but we will make a partial replacement. And this can help people and the food engineers that we're trying to convince them to try the alternatives. You can keep your product, the one you're familiar and the one you love, with the same texture and the same taste. And this is what people are looking for, taste and texture. With the hybrid product, we can do the transmission more slowly, but it will be wiser, I think.
That was just a glimpse of the remarkable conversations we had at NextBite 2025 in Brussels. Next week, we'll shift our focus to the challenges and breakthroughs shaping the path towards a resilient food system, sharing more of the inspiring stories from the event. So stay tuned. For now, thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Food Fight podcast. To learn more, visit the EIT Food website, eitfood.eu, and join the conversation using the hashtag EITFoodFight on our LinkedIn channel @EITFood. And of course, if you haven't already, hit that follow button so you never miss an episode.